I think with that, I want to get to my first design topic, and then we'll play it by ear in terms of how long to make the stream. So, for those of you who aren't following the Discord channel, which again it is linked down below and all that other great stuff, I had the arduous journey of trying to get a Kaizo game to work on my computer, and it lasted about 10 minutes. Just enough time to look at the FAQ, download what I needed, and again, because a Kaizo game is essentially a patch for a ROM, we can't talk about how you do it. But for the first time, I got to play a true Kaizo game following I Want to Be the Guy. And this was the Kaizo hack for Super Mario World called Invictus, which, for people who don't follow the Kaizo community or Kaizo streamers, this was a Kaizo hack released in 2018 that basically they have like their own terminologies for everything for Kaizo hacks. It's called a chocolate hack, which means that it adds new elements and designs that weren't featured in the original Super Mario World. We're talking about levels such as having vertical screen wraps, crazy puzzles. There's one section where you are swimming through water sections that are just literally going like up and down like a platform, and all crazy, of course, Kaizo traps. The idea of a Kaizo fish, which that's a fun thing to say if you've never played a Kaizo game, I have no idea what I'm talking about. But the point about the Kaizo game, again, for people who haven't played them, is that they are notoriously difficult. And here's the funny thing. Invictus is graded as light in terms of difficulty on the website. And in the span of 30 minutes, I died about 100 times. Maybe for that too, El Gordo. And my hand is actually sore. I think I got a cramp in my wrist from trying to play that game at that level for that amount of time. And the thing about Kaizo design is that it's very much like the logical evolution when it comes to old school or retro gaming. And that is that it is 100% mechanical play. And that is different from what I'm going to, I guess, call like improvisational play. So the kind of our topic is going to be discussing the differences between the two and what everybody thinks about it. So when we talk about mechanical play, these are games where everything is set up essentially around fixed timers and triggers. If, for instance, the Medusa head in Castlevania, that infamous wave pattern that it does, that is fixed. Like, you're never going to see Medusa head, all of a sudden, start doing a circle or start homing in on you. Thank Konami on that one. Enemies are set up to spawn whenever you hit specific trigger points, which are usually tied to either player position or to where the screen is scrolling. And when we play old school games, this is why it becomes a lot harder to progress if you're not able to kill an enemy fast enough. Because the enemy pushes you back, you kill him, you walk forward, you hit the screen trigger that you just got, or the spawn trigger, the enemy comes back. And these kinds of games are played, again, very mechanically. They're very pattern driven. If you've watched, Contra play or any classic action-based title, the bosses are always set up to follow a set number of events. Sometimes that pattern may be slightly adjusted based on player position. If I'm this distance away from the boss, he'll do this attack. If I'm this close to the boss, he'll do that. If I'm over here, they'll do another pattern. And if you've watched many AGDQ runs of classic games, a lot of that high-level play comes down to breaking the AI by knowing that if I'm in a certain position, the boss will always do X. So if I can get around X, I can trick the boss into performing that same action again and again, and thereby just, nullify that battle. Because if I don't do that and the boss starts jumping all around and doing crazy attacks, you can read that as well. And that's kind of the major point about these mechanically driven games and about Kaizo. That you're not really playing a Kaizo game, I guess, quote unquote, for the moment. As in, you're reacting to what's going on in that game. If you play a Kaizo game on pure reaction, you will never beat that game. Because one of the major hallmarks of a Kaizo design is that instead of introducing like sections where you're given a break after you perform an obstacle or two, you're basically going to be on, I guess, for a good 2 to 3 minutes of pure, tricky, technical platforming. And I'll give you the example in Invictus. In the first level, the second that level begins, you are shot out of a pipe cannon that you need to hold down the jump button to maintain momentum or you'll fall. When you land on a platform that kind of acts as a seesaw that goes down, goes back up. You have to do a almost pixel precise jump off the platform to dodge chompers above, while a swinging platform down below is doing this. When you land on that platform, you then have to do a quick double jump to hit a Kaizo block before you get pushed in that block and then killed. When you exit that pipe, you have about a quarter of a second to jump off a floating question box to land on a pipe. You then have half a second to jump off of that pipe before it climbs up into a spike. And then that jump, you have to make an aborted jump onto a pixel-precise section of a pipe while a piranha plant is there. If you jump too far, you're going to get hit by that piranha plant. But wait, once you land on that pipe, you then have to quickly jump around the pipe to avoid a Kaizo fish that will hit you if you just land. Now, what I just described over like the last minute, that is let me see if I do a quick calculation in my head. That is about 5 seconds of that level. And that's just 4 sections. And I've only managed to get past that in about 120 tries twice. I don't know what else is in that level. I've only managed to get past it 2 times and then I immediately died. That's how technical it is. And even harder, like I said, there are Kaizo games that are rated harder than Invictus. Exactly, Mike. And those games will actually require you to exploit specific glitches. Such as if you jump Mario at the right angle into a wall, he'll kind of slightly glitch or clip into that wall, allowing you to do like a pseudo wall jump up. And that is almost a frame perfect trick to do. And there are games that require that to make it through. Like, that's not a bonus challenge or an expert or an additional thing. That is the bare minimum to beat that game. And if you've watched the streamer and YouTuber Dode or Dodecahedron, he is doing a Kaizo-a-thon where he's playing, I think he's up to 8, he's picked right now 88 Kaizo games over the span of I think 2008, 2009 to today that he's trying to beat. And you can actually chart, like there's an evolution of Kaizo games from back then to where they're at now. And here's the thing for you folks watching this right now who have no idea what I'm talking about. Kaizo games have actually gotten quality of life features. You wouldn't believe that if I just said it, but yes, they have actually put in things to make them more accessible, I guess, over the years. And these games are just insane at that level of difficulty. But as Mike said in chat a few minutes ago, it's not really you playing a game. It's basically, can you perform 75 exact actions perfectly? Yes, you can beat this level. No, you will never beat this level. And it really is kind of the antithesis of modern game design, even just modern pacing and structure in these levels. Because they're set up in a way that it's not really about, I can't really describe it, like kind of having like a theme or a progression curve. It's just basically, here's a set of actions, do them. And that's it. And that whole thing about doing or having to react to actions before you even get to them, I don't think that's good game design. Because again, it's a very much like a trap kind of mentality that you have to know about beforehand, or you won't be able to solve it. Because by the time it actually gets on screen or that you're able to react to it, it's already too late. But like that is a difference in when we talk about more of game design today, where it's more improvisational. Roguelikes are probably the best example of this. You cannot do a set number of actions in a roguelike and expect to win. Again, news, I think you can probably agree with me with playing FTL. Or even for people who've played Darkest Dungeon, Slay the Spire, or any game that features random or procedurally generated content or situations. It doesn't work like that. You have to be constantly reacting to what's at hand and making adjustments and changes accordingly. It's the same thing with XCOM. Like, XCOM is a game that is very RNG dependent. Everybody knows that. Again, we've lost 90% and higher hit chances, or at least I have. But the people who generally do well in XCOM know how to mitigate RNG. They know how to plan, but at the same time, they have a plan B. Then they have a backup to that backup. Then they'll have a backup to the backup to the backup. And that's a way of, again, understanding that if this 80% chance hit doesn't work, well, I can do X. If X doesn't work, I can do Y. And the people who tend to fail at XCOM or don't do as good or as well, they will end up basically putting all their eggs in one basket. I'm going to set up my entire group around this specific strategy that has an 8% chance to succeed. And then guess what happens if it doesn't succeed? You're screwed because everybody's out of position. And that is why these games, or at least for me, why I prefer them. That it's more about you reacting to what's going on rather than coming up with that plan. Another major part about Kaizo design is that it's become very popular. Me too. It's become very popular for task runs. If you don't know what that term is, task is tool-assisted speedrun. It's basically using a program or a secondary piece of device that plays the game at the beyond human capacity level. We're talking about doing frame-specific elements within milliseconds. They are able to basically break the game in ways that no human could literally ever do, unless we somehow get into that cyberpunk future where we're all heavily modded cyborgs. And people like to watch those task runs because when you're playing a Kaizo game or watching Kaizo footage, it's almost like you're performing like a dance, or like an orchestra is performing a bit of classical work. It's, again, you're listening to something that is done perfectly. And any deviation from that perfection is not going to work. And it has suddenly become popular. Again, there are many YouTubers and Twitch streamers who pretty much exclusively do Mario Maker levels or Kaizo games, whether they're designing them or playing them. But I think for me, like, it just isn't that interesting for me. And then the other point, I'm going to try and include this in a post on Game Wisdom this week, is that it's causing me some very big dissonance when I'm playing this game, because I swear that Mario's physics in this Kaizo game is different than his physics in Super Mario World. Like, something feels off to me. And it's one of those things that you're not going to find in regular games. Again, when you design a brand new game, you are creating your own rule set and systems accordingly. Playing Mario is different than playing Sonic, which is different than playing Earthworm Jim or Felix the Cat, or whatever that other cat's name was in Rockin' Cats. So every game, it's kind of like every game is its own vehicle. You're not going to drive a motorcycle the same way that you'll drive a dune buggy, or a truck, or a plane, or a boat, or anything like that. And so you do have that initial learning curve of figuring out, okay, how does jumping work in this game? How does running work? When we play a Souls-like, can I... I'm sorry, I just lost my word here. Can I cancel out my attacks? Can I dodge cancel? Like, how can I basically work within the rules of this game and then play accordingly? This is why many people who play a Dark Souls game, the first hour or two, you are going to die a lot as you're trying to figure out what's the timing for parrying. Again, raise your hand if you have spent a lot of time in Bloodborne trying to get the repose down with your gun repose, I should say, in that game. But the point is that you're trying to learn the handling of this game, and then it's up to you to play accordingly. But playing Invictus, my brain was running into a situation where I'm telling Mario what to do, and he's not doing it. Like, I would press left. Like, I would press left on the control pad to force him to abort that jump, and it wasn't working. Like, he still just went right into Piranha Plant. And, like, for some reason, it just felt like there were some handling issues. Like, it's almost akin to saying, like, I'm going to take the engine and the hardware of a Ferrari, and I'm going to put it under the hood of a Beetle. So, it looks like a Beetle. You get inside, the inside looks like a Beetle, but the second you start that car, it's going to handle almost like a Ferrari. And it's kind of like that disconnect. That my brain is saying one thing, I'm expecting Mario to do X, but the game is telling him that, or the game is showing me he's doing Y. And it's one of those very weird things that, again, you don't run into with traditional games. It's going to be a very fast Beetle, too. I think it's about to rain, too, out there. I'm just staring out my window. Again, you can see, like, the day-night transitions going on over there. I'm sorry, I had to make sure I'm posing for the camera like that. But, again, like, and this is going to be a part of my book, that I don't think Kaizo design would be marketable. And I'm curious for you folks watching, would you buy a legitimate Kaizo game? If someone was selling a I want to be the guy clone, or making their own original take off of a Mario Kaizo hack, and they're selling it for like $10 to $15, knowing that it is a Kaizo game, would you buy that? And like for me, I don't think I would. Because again, like I can just imagine playing it, hitting that wall, and then just stopping. And it is very much an evolution of classic and retro design. For instance, on the stream we played a few weeks ago several of the games from Loco Milito, Curse Castalia, Curse of Izios, and that's a really good example, again, of that form of modern retro design. His games very much feature fixed patterns, and they're designed like that, but there's still wiggle room in terms of how you can play those games. Granted, you can play them at the super hardcore, getting his quote-unquote secret ending, but they're still open enough that if you're good enough at those games, you can play them. And while you're still dealing with those fixed patterns, it doesn't feel like I must be playing at, the top 99 percentile in order to get through them. Super Meat Boy is a very interesting direction, or a very interesting point about that news, because I would agree it's very much a Kaizo-esque kind of game, in that it requires precision. But I think the reason why that still works for me on my Invictus is that it feels right in my hands. Like, playing as Meat Boy, I know exactly how that character will move, and then it's just about performing the tasks. So I wasn't really getting that disconnect in the same way I was when I was playing Invictus. But again, I think you can still see that same point, that a lot of these Kaizo-esque kind of games, it's basically saying, here's the start, here's the end, and you must perform this exact chain of events in order to get through it. And again, any deviation, any failure, anything that you can't do, you will never succeed in that game. Dusk Force, I think, kind of got that far, especially when you got to the key challenges or the lock gates, where you must perform this 100% right or you will never beat those levels. And again, it's different form of design when we talk about games that have more of that improvisational element to it. When there are random patterns within that game, or even subjective difficulty. For instance, like the 3D Mario games that I talk about in my book, they're a great example of this. The levels are set up wide enough that there isn't a 100% perfect way to play it and that you must accomplish. You can play those levels any way you want, and you may find hidden shortcuts or event breaks that can aid you. But if somebody brand new wants to play Mario Odyssey, they'll have their own path through the game, just as a hardcore speedrunner, world record holder will. And the game is accommodating enough for both. Even something like Dark Souls, despite as people describe it as having extreme difficulty, it's still open up two different builds. If it was that hard, it would basically be saying, if I don't use, let's say, a longsword catalyst build, I will never beat that game. And we've had plenty of fun creating really weird builds or just trying different weapons. And again, it's such a different element from the Kaizo games. A few minutes ago, I mentioned the task bots and stuff like that. And like a task bot could never play a game like Neo or Darkest Dungeon or again Dark Souls or anything like that, because there's no set pattern to it. You have to react to what's going on screen. You can't just assume that this enemy will walk on screen at this point, he will do this attack, and I do this to beat him. It doesn't work like that. And like when you guys are watching me play Neo this past week, I mean, you saw that it was about constant reaction to what's going on. And if you try to play that game or any modern action game mechanically, you're just never going to win. And I think with that, I want to move on. We'll do a quick weird games, and then we'll see if there's any other secondary topics. But yeah, and that's another big. Thank you for saying that news. That reminds me of one other point I want to bring up quickly. That's another big thing about Kaizo games. Those checkpoints are basically like holy grails for you to reach, because you are going to have to do a lot to get there. And many developers, you're going to love to hear this news. Many Kaizo developers will set up traps right at the checkpoint, that if you trick them, you will lose that checkpoint. And they will set up Kaizo traps at the end goal post as well. Imagine that this is the platform. So you land right here, and then all of a sudden, like a bullet bill will shoot out and hit you. And there is no way, again, to know that that's there unless you've already triggered it and obviously died from it. And I am pretty sure if you give that to a casual player and they somehow get to that point and it happens, they're probably going to throw a controller against the wall, or lift their tower up and throw it out the window they're playing on the computer. And yeah, like that is one of the big things about modern game design. You don't want the player to feel like they're losing or having to repeat content. But that's the essential point about Kaizo game. Basically, every level is essentially just two sections. Beginning to checkpoint, checkpoint to the end. And you have to perform everything perfectly, or you're never going to do it. And I just find that... Yep, exactly, Mike. And... And yeah, Mario Maker has become that 100%. For anyone who hasn't, if you Google or watch on YouTube, people who play, 0.001% Mario Maker levels, that is just the complete opposite of good game design or modern game design. That is a perfect lesson how to not design levels. and there are some crazy ones. That is Twilight Zone or Tales from the Dark Side levels of design.